Welcome, welcome everyone. This is a very, very special Turtle Tank Me First live interview with none other than Aurora Levins Morales, who's one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met. One of our OTs, our original turtles. In fact, Aurora was perhaps the first person to click that sign up button for the collective incubator when we first launched. So Aurora, we owe you a great deal. Your wisdom, your brilliance, your eldership has been unparalleled in Turtle Tank. And every time you speak, my heart just opens and expands. And I know, this was a fated communion, let me say, and union with us. And so I'm just so excited to have you. I want to introduce you formally, but I just wanted to say a few kind of informal words here. And just come back a little bit to the Me First campaign, and we're going to come back to Aurora. So the Me First campaign is really about not sacrificing ourselves anymore in our movements, and that being the radical act that's actually going to grow impact, grow influence, grow support. So towards a world of radical love and freedom, and sacrificing the parts of ourselves that don't believe that putting ourselves first is actually going to bring that world forward. And so we are no longer interested in that, that level of self-sacrifice, that level of martyrdom. And so if you're interested in hearing more about the Me First campaign, go ahead to turtletank.co/Me First. And the links are available everywhere. You can go on our website, just turtletank.co. Everything's available if you don't remember exactly all of that. And on our Facebook page, we've already had 3 interviews, one with EJ, one with myself, and one with India Harville, who's also a staff member. And this is the first turtle that is not working internal to Turtle Tank, but is in the Turtle Tank family, very going strong for the 2nd year now. I'm really, really honored to have this super mega amazing human here with us today. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Aurora, and EJ is gonna be interviewing Aurora directly, and we'll be asking some really interesting questions about Me First, purpose, and some of the themes that we've been talking about recently. And so you're in for a special treat, because Aurora, of course, has a way with words, and we're putting these words together in such a beautiful way that is medicine for all of us. And so very excited for that. Very excited for that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Aurora formally. So Aurora Levins Morales is an internationally known Puerto Rican Jewish feminist writer and lifelong arts-based organizer. She's taken part in many of the social justice movements of our times, and her work is widely used by many kinds of activists and taught in classrooms from elementary to graduate schools. She's the author of 6 books, and there are a few coming, I think, and her writing has appeared in dozens of anthologies and been translated into 7 languages. She is an immigrant, a trauma survivor, was a single mother, and has lived with chronic illness and disability most of her life. She believes in the power of art to shift imagination and lay the foundations for deep-rooted change. She lives in Tomales, California, in a sustainable, non-toxic, tiny house she designed. There's so many amazing things I could say about Aurora, about the work that she's done on a personal level, on a communal level, but I'm gonna leave it for this interview. So we won't have anything else to talk about. So, so we're gonna get started now. EJ, I will give you the floor. Aurora, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Aurora, thank you so much for being here. Hold on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Are we having a technical problem?
Yeah. Hold on. 1 second.
All right.
Well, I guess maybe while I'm figuring this out, Aurora, is there anything you want to share about what prompted you to actually click that link and join the collective incubator?
Right.
Well, I had been seeing the logo on Facebook a lot, but I wonder what that is. And then a friend of mine, Mkali Hashiki, posted it and said, hey, this is great, check it out. I had been really struggling with my life as a disabled activist writer. I grew up in the culture of radical self-sacrifice. Those were the movements that I spent time in. And it was, you weren't really supposed to spend a time and attention thinking about thriving individually. It was seen as contradictory to helping humanity thrive instead of actually being part and parcel of it. And so I was really struggling with, how do I have a sustainable life and make enough to live on and do the work that I want to do in the world? And I knew I needed help, and I knew that the kinds of help I had pursued before had really not been about the kind of work I do.
Right.
A lot of the advice given to writers about how to survive financially is write to the market instead of to your dreams, instead of to who you are. Most of the writers I knew sustained their writing by either teaching in a university or teaching writing workshops, hustling for grants all the time, doing editing work, and kind of building a secondary work life around the writing and having very little energy left for the writing. And I knew that with my chronic illness, I wasn't going to be able to pull that off.
Right.
And so when I saw an opportunity that talked about radicalism and entrepreneurship and being driven by what we love, I said, oh, okay, I got to try that. And I was nervous about it. I had almost no money. I'm like, okay, I'm going to plunk some money down. I'm going to commit to 90 days. And it's been 2 years and I'm not going anywhere. So it was a combination of those things happening up here and just a great big yes in my body.
I love it.
Thank you, Aurora. So could you share about how your work with Turtle Tank has helped you start practicing Me First more in your life and your work?
Yeah. Just being asked the question that nobody had ever really asked me, what parts of what you spend your time on do you actually love, as opposed to, I mean, the things that I really hated, I didn't do, but there were things I was good at and indifferent to that took up way too much of my time. And then things that I couldn't even really tell if I liked them or not. Or there were okay things to do, but that really didn't energize me. And so being asked that question over and over again very quickly had me clearing a lot of stuff out of my calendar. For instance, one of the things I realized is that although I do occasionally enjoy doing a writing workshop, my life is not about teaching writing. My life is about doing the writing.
Right.
And, doing that crafting of story that I think is really essential to what the world needs right now. And, I've been taught by this society to think of that as self-indulgent.
Right.
That for an artist to actually take the time to create the art is somehow a luxury, and that if it's pleasurable, then it's a privilege, and you're somehow taking something from other people by doing that. That if there's pleasure in your work, it's not really work.
Right.
And going through the process of clarifying my goals, of clarifying my vision for what I actually wanted my day-to-day life to be. I've always been clear about my purpose, but I wasn't clear about how to implement it. And so there was a tremendous amount of clutter energetically in my day-to-day life, and I was chasing small opportunities because I was panicked about money.
Right.
And I remember y'all telling me, it's like, this can take a while. It's not going to be instantaneous. Hang in there. No, we're not going to help you figure out how to have like an income tomorrow, but stick with it. It will unfold. Mm. And I had to really stop myself from chasing after things that weren't really worth the energy invested in them for, modest amounts of money. But it was eating up the energy that should have been going to really clarifying and refining what I most wanted to do. Yeah. And so now, 2 years in, it's really easy for me to say no to a lot of things. And I just came back from a 2-week writing residency in New Orleans where I didn't say yes to a single thing I didn't want to do.
Yes. Wow.
And invitations to speak in classes and to do, other lectures. And I was like, nope. Yeah, I'll do that one. And so Turtle Tank has really strengthened my capacity to do that and to really take seriously my responsibility to guard the space in which I create.
I love that.
my life is so much better than it was 2 years, almost exactly 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, I think especially with that piece around money, because that's such like a survival like response of, oh, well, I need to say yes and do all these things so I can have enough money. But then like that question of like really sitting and getting clear about like how much what it's costing you on an energetic and like well-being level is really powerful. And so thank you for speaking to that.
Yeah. I want to add, something to one saying. Aurora's been instrumental in, you've been instrumental in the conversations that we're able to have in the tank, and because really it's a collaborative effort here. We came in with a foundation, and I know we've been refining that foundation, just kind of working with some of the OTs that are still here, and one of the big questions that's been coming up again is, how do we define work? The idea of, just what is work, and that work is often associated with the concept of self-sacrifice, and then flipping that or sacrificing and struggle and challenge and all of that stuff. And if we flip that and start to talk about desire, then it's self-indulgent, right? When in reality, that's the magnetic power that draws, income, that draws, all these other things, and then kind of simplifies and clarifies and gets the message across and all of that. So there's something about what you're saying that reminds me of that, just being able to I don't know, I'd love to hear if you want to say anything. I saw you kind of like, yeah, go ahead.
It's also an incredibly ableist concept of work, and as somebody who is very involved in the disability justice movement and thinks about that a lot, people with chronic illnesses and disabilities that get in the way of our being efficiently exploited by this economy have had to learn a lot about how to redefine productivity and how to redefine work. And the thing is, there aren't a lot of places out there that give you the support to develop a truly sustainable work life. Mm-hmm. And so that is one of the things that I got to find in Turtle Tank was, there are people who can sustain their writing life by running around like crazy. I'm not one of them. My body won't do that. Yeah. And so the whole orientation toward desire-driven vocation in the world is also very compatible with the principles of disability justice. Mm-hmm. To say that it's desire-driven, and it's also driven by what my body-mind system is and is not up for. Yeah. And there aren't a lot of places where you can get help developing a sustainable way of work that doesn't tell you to drive yourself past your capacity.
Mm-hmm. Right, and the fact that working within your capacity and your the way that you're made to work is what is the most effective and the most impactful and the most powerful. And believing that, which is working against all the systems that are saying, no, that's not true, right? And then seeing that in action. I think you're one of those examples of like, okay, this is how, yes. So doing that is actually, the universe, the system is responding differently to me when I start to kind of do that. And we can learn a great deal from that. One, from the disability justice, space. And I say this, also from a personal place, Aurora, and EJ can speak to that as well. I can't work in conventional spaces. I'm not made that way. From a mental perspective, from a mental health perspective, from a body perspective, my health quickly started to deteriorate in very tangible ways. And I dealt with some chronic stuff, and and then that's also what prompted me to, design my own work life. And when EJ walked in and supported with that, it was the combination between like the alignment with desire, and then EJ's kind of workflow style, working how you're designed to work, right? So aligning with desire and working how you're designed to work. I don't know, EJ, if you want to say something to that, and then Aurora, of course, come back.
Yeah, I actually have like a follow-up question for Aurora, because I really love, because there are two pieces, right? There's one, how you're going to interact with the world, what you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to, and then there's your internal dialogue. And there's this really beautiful way that you've talked about your writing process and what you choose to write on and how that shifted to you through sitting with like the work at Turtle Tank and this question of desire and your energy. And so I was wondering if you could like speak to that about your own internal dialogue and how that shifted for you.
Really, I got to turn the volume all the way down on the self-punishing monologue that most of us carry around with us about you're wasting time, you're not being productive enough, you're not doing it right. One of the most liberating ideas that I got from this work was if you're not making the goal, something's wrong with the goal, not with you.
Yes.
It's just the goal, because you're not thinking clearly about that. Nobody else ever said that to me. And, you know, my own writing process does align with that most of the time when I'm not being pressured from the outside. I can tell if I get blocked in a piece of writing, then something's wrong with what I'm trying to do. And I need to kind of step back and go, okay, something's off here. How do I shift that? But what Turtle Tank has allowed me to do is really structure all of my work life around that process of feeling for the right piece of writing, the right pace of writing. I have really taken in that I hate deadlines. I would much rather write something and then offer it than get a contract to write something and be in a hostile relationship with the calendar. Yeah. It doesn't work well for me. And in Turtle Tank, that's validated. Right. I now know this about my work style. And so I'm cranking writing out at a much faster pace.
Yes.
And with much less stress, because I'm going, okay, this is how I work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not doing homework anymore. Yeah, I think it's just, the biggest thing I've noticed is that over the course of the 2 years, I'm not having that argument in my head anymore about you should. I'm going, okay, I'm trying to write this essay and I'm getting stuck and it's feeling like pulling teeth. So I need to either adjust the essay or go do something else and, see what bubbles up in my subconscious, but that I don't try to force myself through the work anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really paying off in really obvious material ways as well.
Yeah.
I had a Patreon platform that I was getting maybe $35 a month from that a year and a half ago, and now it's more than 900. It's pushing 1,000 a month of supporters who are really supporting that process and who value what I do, and I'm in communication with them as a community of people. And so I will often post writing about my process. Here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm thinking about. And I have a group of people who are invested in multiple ways in my work. And they're not, it's not a product-based exchange. It's not, somebody early on suggested, well, why don't you have like a vegetable thing wherever, you send produce every month, they pay you and you produce a short story. I was like, I can't do that. But, whenever I add prizes to the Patreon structure, nobody ever claims them. Because they're actually not in it for the prizes. They're in it for the relationship that they can have with my writing.
Exactly.
So it's been very affirming of the Turtle Tank principles to see the people who really do respond to desire-driven, authentic work.
Yes. Yes. And then the idea that the money follows the relationships. And it follows the desire, the relationships, that there's in the community. And we've always known this as marginalized people of color, that's really how we've always worked, so it's just taking those concepts and really owning them in a very active and unflinching way, just like, okay, yes, let's go all the way. I always say this, when we're desire driven and we're purpose driven human beings, we can't be 99%. In the purpose, like we have to be like 110, because that, that's the difference between, totally falling apart and then, having massive impact. It's always like that kind of impasse right there, so we have to commit because it's we're operating within a universe where desire is driving everything. So if we say, oh, desire is driving things, but we don't really commit to it, then we're going to fall short. And then we say, oh, see, I told you desire doesn't work, right? But then when we really, you know what I'm saying? So go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, I'm just thinking about the fact that not only do I not chase small projects that don't pay enough because they somewhat damp down my fear, but I'm really not chasing projects at all. I'm inhabiting my purpose.
Right.
And then opportunities appear that are aligned to that purpose, and I'm going, okay, yeah, I guess this is what I'm going to be doing next. You know, it's finding myself having written a series of poems that started getting used in synagogues as part of worship services, and then suddenly I'm finding myself working with a group of emerging radical synagogues to create a poet in residence position for me so that I can write a whole bunch of liturgy. Never would have thought of that and sort of built it as that's what I want to do. But I'm sitting in my purpose of knowing what my writing is for and knowing what the state of the world is. And then when a project comes along, a possibility comes along that resonates with that, then I can say yes to it.
Right.
But I'm less and less in planning mode,
right,
and more in a being mode. And you know, it can sound from the outside pie in the sky, kind of new agey, you know, think it and it will come, a bank account will magically open. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But there is something about being really centered in what you're here for that draws to you the people who want to do that kind of work with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, as I get older and I'm more aware that I have limited time, because we always have limited time, but when we're young, we think it's going to last forever. And I'm aware that there's only so much time left under the best of circumstances for me to do what I came here to do. And so I have less patience also with the things that, you know, feel like make work to support what I'm really wanting to do.
right.
And it's wonderful that there's an opportunity for people to learn that earlier in their lives.
Yeah. I mean, I really love that phrase of inhabiting your purpose. And I'm curious what that looks like for you.
Partly it's about not, you know, we live in a society that, on the one hand, people make grandiose claims all the time, but also people get shamed for claiming the importance of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I was working with the process of kind of figuring out my different roles, the word that often comes to me is prophecy. Mm-hmm. And that feels really sort of self-aggrandizing to say, hey, I'm a prophet. But what that work is about finding ways to speak necessary truths to one's community, to one's world. And so inhabiting my purpose is not being diffident about that it matters to do this kind of work, that poetry isn't a luxury, that the language I use, that the arts, and in my case, literary arts, are way more powerful than pretty much any other tool in helping people shift consciousness, shift awareness, expand a sense of possibility, imagine a different world. And I can't think of anything more critical to be doing at a time when, if we can only make the big shifts we need to make if we can imagine them. But aside from that, this is my piece of the work. Yeah. I remember somebody asking Audre Lorde, like, how do you deal with all the bad news in the world? And she said, find your work and do it.
Yep.
And, you know, I fell in love with the alphabet when I was 5, and it's always been clear that writing is my thing. Mm. And so inhabiting my purpose is fully claiming that.
Yeah.
Saying, this is what I do and it matters.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm going to ask for support to do it. And, you know, yes, I'm going to guard my time. I'm not going to, you know, give it away to everybody who requests it. And I'm really going to think with each decision that I make in my day, does this or does this not support what I'm here to do?
Yeah.
Does it nourish me? Does it enhance the joyfulness of the process? Does it help me move something forward into the world?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you all helped me do that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I mean, I got goosebumps when you talked about the prophecy piece and claiming that. And I think there's something in there like about inhabiting your purpose that's really also about inhabiting your value. Like just the value that your presence has, like the value that you bring, and like claiming that. And also like speaking to the fear of like why we don't claim that, why we shrink away from it. Like, who do I think I am? What are people gonna think of me? You know, that's too big. It's like being able to like to really see it and like value like who we are as people.
Right.
And it's very linked to the work of disability justice as well. I'm seeing in the comments here somebody talking about struggling with neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I've had to learn how to do is say, okay, yeah, I'm an epileptic. I have brain injuries. I have chronic fatigue. I have PTSD. Those things actually feed into my ability to write the way that I write. It requires me to build certain protections of, you know, I'm not getting overstimulated, making sure I have rest. There are things I have to do to hold that, you know, people with whose nervous systems can take more buffeting may not need to do.
Right.
But that's part of fully inhabiting my purpose.
Yeah.
You know, that every part of my history contributes to my capacity. It's not about becoming someone else.
Right.
And, you know, earlier you were talking about people of color and indigenous traditions. I have to say that throughout my time working with Turtle Tank, it hasn't felt like it was new information.
Mm-hmm.
It's always felt like, oh, I'm coming home to something that I actually had in my bones.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Remembering, reclaiming. Yeah.
Right. Resting into how we're made and the value, you know. And I think it's the canary, you know, in the mind, you know, whatever. Essentially, for us, where what I mean by that is everybody should be listening to their bodies in this way, you know. But you know, some of us can ignore more than others, you know, because we're you know, we assume that you know, but the pressure we're taking is still impacting us in a really negative way. You know,
that's why I think disabled and chronically ill people should be leading all our social movements.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. And with desire driven, you know, self-designed, you know, work lives, community lives, all of that, because that's where some of the most brilliant ideas and you know, really thriving mechanisms are coming out of that, you know. And it is, in fact, some of my chronic stuff that even put me in this position to even think about this stuff. And so, you know, I deeply connect to that myself. You know, again, we talk about like mental health and all of that stuff, but also physical health. You know, I couldn't work more than a certain hours a day. I just could not. That was it, you know, and there was no way around it for me.
And we've internalized the idea that there's some almost biological norm of working 40 hours a week. Well, you know, many brave people fought to get it down to 40 hours a week. You know, the 8-hour day, which really doesn't exist anymore because everybody's being forced into overtime. But there's nothing natural about that way of working. It's been imposed on us by extractive economics.
Exactly.
And there's more than enough work to do in the world. We just need to distribute the resources so everybody has a roof, everybody's got food and medicine, everybody's got play, and you know, everybody gets to do something meaningful.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know you have more questions, EJ.
Yeah.
I was going to shift gears because I feel like we've been talking about how Me First has kind of transformed your relationship to work and your work life and your art. And I'm curious how Me First and practicing Me First has shifted your life.
Well, it's easier to rest. Still a struggle for me, but easier. But it's also made me value pleasure more. You know, even though it felt like a terrible luxury, I went ahead and joined a a spa that's in the town a half hour away from where I live so that I could go be in a steam room and a sauna on a regular basis. It's right next to where I get groceries. And it felt really outrageous to me to go ahead and spend that money. And it's been so good for me.
Yeah.
To be able to, because I'm a member, I don't have to sweat over, is it worth, you know, spending the money for a day pass when I'm only going to be there for 45 minutes or an hour. Now I go shopping, I go soak, I, you know, do a few things, I go home, and I've built more self-care into my daily life without feeling like that's somehow taking from someone else.
Mm.
You know, that self-care is actually part of my job. It's part of my, you know, recently I've come up with a way of framing this that, you know, in a way it's a trick to kind of use people's sense of duty to get us to do self-care, but that my health and my morale belong to the commons, that they're part of the resource of the planet at this moment.
Yes.
And that I am actually a steward of my own capacity, and I have to tend to it, otherwise it won't be available. Like if I, you know, do the traditional activist thing of run my body into the ground, collapse, and be unavailable for a few months, get up and do it again, I'm actually being irresponsible with my relationships, the reciprocity that I have with my communities, and my obligation to my planet.
Mm.
I need to actually keep my pacing and my self-care and the amount of pleasure I have in my day in pace that is sustainable, so that I can do the work I'm here to do right up until the last minute.
Yeah.
You know, my father, who was a biologist, ecologist, and a radical, and who taught at a university, had his last meeting with a student on the Friday before the Tuesday he died. I want to be doing what I most care about right up until the last minute, in whatever form that's possible for me. And so I have a responsibility to see to it that I have, and you know, it's like saying I'm not going to take vitamin C because that's self-indulgent. You know, it's like I'm taking vitamin pleasure and vitamin desire and vitamin self-sustaining.
Yeah.
One of the things I did this year that I think it would have been hard to do last year was decide that the amount of healing I'd had from my brain injury from coming to a clinic here in Utah wasn't enough for me. And I was going to go back and do another round. And I made that decision actually before I had another injury. But I was going to go back and get more for myself, even though, you know, it was a lot of money.
Right.
But I was like, no, I'm not actually okay with my brain being 2/3 functional.
Right.
So there are a lot of things, you know, when I notice that I have the feeling that something is a luxury, I stop and check it. It's like, is this really something that it doesn't make sense to put resource to? Or is this something that the nasty voice is saying, you don't get to put resource into your own life?
Mm-hmm.
But we know the only way you grow a good crop is by adding nutrients to the soil. You can't like throw some stuff down on poor soil and say, why aren't you growing? You have to put compost in, you have to put minerals in, you have to know what the plant needs in order to flourish.
Right.
So I'm gardening myself.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you've already like touched on this next question, but let me just ask it and see if there's anything you want to add about the connection between me first, our radical purpose, what we're here to do, and then creating this world of radical love and freedom. What do you see as the connection between these three ideas?
You know, when I was a teenage activist, a lot of times you heard the phrase, wait till after the revolution. And it could be about feminism, and it could be about queer rights, it could be about dealing with racism. And there's all these different ways in which some group was telling everyone else, once we have dismantled the main structures of some piece of the oppressive society, then we'll be able to pay attention to having decent lives. And it doesn't work that way. You can't actually create a just society from a place of deprivation. You know, that what works, what sustains us, is creating little pieces of that world all the time, is creating little experiences of solidarity and of sovereignty in our daily lives and in our communities. And that from that base, we're then able to move toward what we're dreaming in a much more effective way. About 20-something years ago, the Zapatista movement in Mexico, in Chiapas, had to make a decision about which way to go. They were under tremendous pressure from the Mexican military, and was like, either we become better soldiers and we fight them off, or we become better builders of the world we want and we have something worth fighting for. And that was the path that they took. And so you have this interesting situation where they don't have state power. They don't control the state of Chiapas. There are Zapatista villages interspersed with non-Zapatista villages. But within those communities, people are creating something really worth defending.
Yes.
That they're creating deep shifts in the culture. They're taking on sexism. They're taking on relationship to the land. They're taking on a lot of fundamental pieces of the world we want and building little bits of it. And so, you know, I think that, you know, I'm not someone who believes we can just sort of sit at home and do self-improvement projects and, you know, the oppressive system will collapse. But I do believe that unless we're trying to live in, to whatever degree is possible, live in the world we're trying to create, that we're not going to have the capacity to keep pushing. So, you know, for example, I went to Cuba for medical care, and it was an extraordinary experience. I talk about it every single chance I get. Even though we don't have here a system where we can go to the hospital for free, to just talk about the humanity of that system, to talk about the way that I got treated, to talk about the integration of what we consider, you know, conventional and alternative medicine, and they have all thrown together in the same pot, to just talk about that and then think about, like, what are the ways that we can make our experience of healing more integrated? What are the little bits of that we can do? How can we support each other in a much more concrete way to take care of ourselves in the face of a medical system that's not humane? Just having those stories and carrying them around while we're struggling for really basic patient rights makes a difference. You know, to know that that's somewhere in the world. So I think that, you know, I also grew up, my parents were communist. You know, I grew up in a world in which bourgeois individualism was the accusation, you know, when people were, you know, belly button gazing, that they were spending too much time actually reflecting about life. We were actually spending way too little time reflecting and leaping into action all the time. But there was this idea that it was incompatible to be fighting for a just world and to be taking care of yourself. Sacrifice was the flag that everybody was waving. And people burned out, and people got cynical, and people made bad decisions because they were so immersed in action as the only aspect of radicalism. And it isn't. You know, slowing down and thinking and feeling and tending to ourselves and tending to each other, it's like little clumps of, you know, cellular structures forming that make a web of possibility for us. I do a lot of eldering of young activists these days, and I almost always within the first 10 minutes I say, slow down. You don't actually have to leap into action right now. The work of justice has always been urgent. It's not more urgent at this moment than it was, you know, in my grandparents' time or my great-grandparents' time. Just take a breath. And you're going to have to be in this body for hopefully a long time, so don't spend it all in the first, you know, decade. So I just don't think it's possible to do the huge amount of shift that we need to do if we don't learn to put ourselves at the center of our own lives. You know, on the airplanes, how they say, you know, put your own mask on before attempting to, it's like, if you don't have an oxygen mask on, you're not going to be breathing and you're going to pass out and you're not going to be able to help anyone else. And so to me, that says put on your own oxygen mask. There's plenty to do for others, but put on your mask so that you're breathing and you can think straight.
Yeah.
Right. or queer or whatever.
Yeah, think whatever. Think clearly.
I'm just messing with you.
I know you do that a lot.
I know. But I love, oh my goodness, everything you just said. I'm sorry, EJ, I'm like jumping in.
No, jump in. I was going to ask you to.
Just the connection between the Zapatista, way of organizing, which is so fundamental also for me in terms of how this was moving forward. I think sometimes what happens in the kind of leftist approach mirrors in so many ways the corporate approach in terms of action, this and that, and it's like when you were talking about it and just now, all I was thinking was it's exactly what we critique on the other side. We work exactly the same way. We as the system we're critiquing, right? And then with the Zapatista space, being able to kind of step out of that. And I think there is also, a level, an indigenous frame to this that I think sometimes was left out in terms of some of the context of, there's leftist work that doesn't include that, and is kind of still operating in that kind of, against something or, against the current system rather than, again, working through an indigenous frame that is, how do we start to create the world that we want one bit at a time? And this idea of being, working from love, that we frame that in Turtle Tank, working from a place of freedom. I'm already free, right? In this particular way. So how do I work from a place of freedom, or how do I set myself free every day, and work from that place rather than seek freedom, or try to grab at freedom, or try to grab at love, or try to create love. And so, there's a distinction there. I'm not using the words in the best way possible, but this idea, and I want to hear, more from you about that. But I'm seeing sometimes when we stand in opposition to certain things, a lot of times we're working very similarly to those things. We
can't help internalizing the culture of the oppressive society that we live in. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe we can individually step out of an oppressive system, but we can find ways to function within it that create these little bubbles of possibility within it. Right. Because I still live in a capitalist society that has tremendous state power and can crush me, physically crush my life out of me. Okay. There's a lot of internalized ideas of struggle that come from states and military metaphors, and the idea that a violent opposition is more radical than a cultivation of some other possibility. I call that decibelism. The louder I shout, the more radical I am. I have compassion for it because we don't actually have a lot of models about how to be fierce in defense of our humanity without being militaristic.
Right.
How to be firm without being violent. How to have patience to cultivate something when the pressures on us are so intense and so immediate. It's a challenging thing to figure out, and it's not something we can figure out, I don't think, as individuals. It's like, how do we collectivize the individual struggles that we have day to day in this world that we live in right now? I often talk about that people who are working for social justice need to have our eyes on the stars and our feet in the mud, be aware of the muddy current circumstances and the things we need to do just to stay alive and keep going in it, but really keep our vision on something beautiful and positive. And what is it that we're trying to say yes to? Right. Because, it is important to name the things that are crushing humanity because there's so much illusion shrouding it.
Right.
To name the festival of consumerism that's happening today, for example. To name what Thanksgiving is really about. To name those things, but not to put all our attention on them.
Right.
You know, so for me, often we're yes deficient in our social justice movements. We have a clear idea of what we're against, but we don't have a clear sense of what the alternative is. And so that's part of what I collect in the way of stories. I'm looking for the stories that give some hint of the yes. I recently last year had the opportunity to give a Yom Kippur sermon in my synagogue in which I talked about joy as the only sustainable fuel for a lifetime of activism. And I was talking about my different yes moments. And one of the things I talked about was being in Cuba. And for various reasons, we got delayed at the National Music School. We were hanging out there waiting for our bus, and this group of young men, including 3 Afro-Cuban men, all teenagers, just gave us this impromptu concert. And I'm watching them play, and I'm feeling completely choked up and like on the edge of tears. And it took me a minute to figure out that it was the first time in my life that I had seen young Black men whose body language held no expectation of violence. I had never seen that before. And so, you know, I carry those young men with me as my yes every time I go to a demonstration to protest yet another police murder of a young Black man or young Black woman. You know, I have that yes that I want to see young African heritage people whose bodies are not guarded in any way. And without holding that yes, things get too grim for me.
Yes.
Without holding that yes, it's just like they're killing us, they're killing us, they're killing us all the time, every single day. And it's very hard to keep enough of a sense of hope for me to be useful in those circumstances. So me first is also a way of figuring out where our yes is.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that connected, EJ, I know you mentioned radical purpose. I think we talk about purpose as obviously an emergent, the mystery of that mysterious yes that we haven't even witnessed yet, you know, and you spoke a little bit to that, Aurora, previously. Like, I didn't even know what I was imagining, right? And there's something to that idea for me around radical purpose. And EJ, maybe you can speak a little bit to that. The idea of the relationship between radical purpose and the way that we teach it at Turtle Tank, and the honoring of the mystery and the vision that's being born as we come into it, right? And so rather than we already know, you know, which is kind of like sometimes the way activism is, you know, we already know this is the best way to do this thing, or, you know, we already know, you know, or it's been done. Let's go look at all the ways in which things have been, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think there is so much to be learned and integrated and wisdomized, as we say in Turtle Tank, you know, from all of that, but then not forgetting, you know, that there's an interplay with something constantly emerging that is of our time, that is of us, that could not have ever been from anywhere else, you know, in that particular way. Yeah.
And unless we have the tools to listen to ourselves, we're going to miss those cues.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, unless we're used to respecting our impulses and desires, then, you know, we look at a shifting, you know, look at the incredible ecological threat that we're living with right now, that if we're not attuned to that sense of possibility and shift, and that we can constantly be adjusting what it is we're here to do, then, you know, a lot of people face that and go, I don't know, I can't do anything. And they give up, or they just kind of say, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to keep on my path doing, you know, what I was planning to do before I realized that, you know, extinction is happening really fast, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
When we're really attuned to those inner adjustment mechanisms, which Turtle Tank really cultivates and creates a support structure for, then we have way more flexibility. We have all this navigational input, and we have way more flexibility to micro adjust our course and go, okay, this is what's happening. So I'm in Utah because California caught on fire and I couldn't breathe in the smoke levels that are where my house is. And so I'm going, okay, this is a climate change moment. Mm. The place that I live is in fact a frontline climate change community, and I didn't fully take that in until 2 years in a row. The air became unbreathable because of smoke, and the rain patterns are changing. And so how do I want to adjust what I'm talking about? How do I want to bring smoke into my conversation? How do I want to talk about flammability? How do I want to, this is a moment for talking about indigenous controlled burn technology for preventing huge forest fires that has been exercised in California for 5,000 years. Right. This is a moment to raise up indigenous sovereignty in response to wildfires. Mm-hmm. So what do I want to write about next week? And so I'm constantly adjusting that, but I'm way more able to do that with the support of Turtle Tank because we've created together a subculture. We've created a bubble in which the conversation we have with each other is constantly, what do we need to adjust? Where's the desire sitting? What is it that feels nourishing? And so I'm not struggling all by myself to keep honoring that. Yeah. I can go on our Facebook group and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. And 20 people go, oh, this, that, the other thing. And we'll pool what we know and remind each other of the value of that. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that thing of just coming back to like remembering that aligning with and practicing and honoring our radical purpose and our desires is a practice. Like it's not a goal or destination we're going to get to and then be done. And that it's a practice that becomes sustainable in community because we can witness each other, we can hold each other, we can remind each other, we can lean into each other, and recognizing that we live in a world that intentionally distracts us from our purpose and our desire and the signs that we're getting internally, right? Those internal like GPS signals. And so being able to find community around that is really, really, like really important and really powerful. So I think a lot of times when we talk about like self-care and like purpose, it's talked about in the self-help field of like, this is what you need to do to fix yourself and get better. And so I love
yoga.
Yeah, just bringing back in like, yeah, there's self-work that only we can do, and there are decisions and choices that only we can make. And community is what supports us in being able to stay connected to that and to sustain that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Turtle Tank is in fact one of those bubbles where there is a culture being created in this group that goes against the hyperproductivity extraction model of work. And so it's creating a little bubble of sovereignty within a society that is not in any way endorsing sovereignty, but it's creating some space for us to enact our purpose. Yeah. And have sufficient, it's not that there is an opposition to those purposes, there is, but we're creating a system, a community that allows us to have enough space in our heads, enough freedom of perception and awareness that we can actually choose to keep enacting our purpose and come back to that again and again and again and again.
Yes.
So it is a treasure.
Thank you, Aurora.
Thank you. I just thought of the word, community of practice. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here, and there's what's the point of purpose if you're not in community? The whole point of the whole definition that we talk about at Turtle Tank EJ is, it's the fundamental organizing principle. Organizing for what? For community. I mean, that's the point. So if we're not able to, interact and learn and practice in community, then what's the point? That's why we're here. So there's that relationship and in communion really with the environment that we're in. It doesn't have to be, human beings at all times, or only human beings or maybe no human beings, but there's always relationship.
And thinking differently. So, I grew up in Latin America where calling oneself a revolutionary isn't pretentious. It's part of how people talk about their commitment to living in a just world. And my father used to say the work of a revolutionary is to shift consciousness. that the first job is really to shift what people are capable of thinking about. And so Turtle Tank is in fact shifting consciousness. It's creating a different way of thinking about what we're here for, and about what productive work is, and about how to fulfill one's purpose in the world. And by shifting our consciousness together, we're creating a bigger field of possibility to engage with the big social structures, to create alternatives. And for some of us, that is pushing up directly against them. But we're creating a place that supports a different way of thinking about the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful. And thinking about ourselves in that world. So it's the most integrated experience I've had of going all the way from the most internal self to the biggest global with a group of people.
Ooh, yeah.
Very powerful.
These are golden, just medicine words again, medicine to my ears. Just also so grateful. EJ, I know you want to, do you have any other thoughts about this or closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel so much gratitude for you, Aurora. Like, not only for what you've brought to Turtle Tank and the community, but just for your work in the world. I mean, so many times when you were talking, like, I literally got goosebumps, you know? And yeah, and I'm just so grateful for you and who you are and your purpose and how you're living it, how you're inhabiting it, because it's definitely impacted and shifted my life and transformed me. And so just thank you for just gathering those possibility stories for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
You help sustain what I do day to day. So thank you for creating this magical space.
You're so welcome, Aurora. Thank you for creating this magical place with us.
No, thank you. Let's get ourselves together.
I know there's a lot of love, and it hasn't been without challenge. I just want to tell people this because we've had our moments where we were just like, okay, is this gonna work? How is this gonna work? Is this gonna work for me? Is it gonna work for you? What's going on here? And so people don't see the journey, but and I'm again so incredibly grateful that you stayed through this. Work.
Oh yeah, I wasn't about to. I wasn't about to let go of this. And also, I've gotten to watch the two of you figure out more and more how to apply what you're giving us, and really keep taking it another few steps to being truly sustainable work for the two of you. So, you do a marvelous job of modeling what it is you teach, which is okay, course adjustment. Okay, this needs to be more me first. Okay. And so you're continuing, all the bumps in the road have actually been the road. And it's been really beautiful to watch it becoming more and more focused, more and more clear, more and more putting yourselves at the center of this astonishing project. So
thank you.
And there was no difficulty in hanging in.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad.
Thank you so much, Aurora. You shared so many gems in here. I just want to invite people who are watching us live, people who are watching the replay, please leave us a comment. Let us know what stood out to you, what it struck in you, what you have to share, what you want to contribute to the conversation. And we love hearing from you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. And you can watch this story and more on our Me First page. You can find that at www.turtletank.co/mefirst. And we'll have this full story there, as well as others from our Turtle Tank team and our Turtle Tank community. And you can join us again next week on Thursday. We're going to have 2 stories from 2 more original turtles sharing about their Me First experiences and their perspectives. So I hope you can join us next week for those.
Yeah, thank you also. Aurora, thank you. I'm so excited, and y'all, you need to come and hang out with us and with Aurora because Aurora's in the group. So,
right.
And you can also join my Patreon page.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. And if there's anything, Aurora, you'd like to, put forth, and that's a great addition.
How can people find your page, your Patreon page?
You can just let's see. I could look it up right for a second.
Oh no, did we lose Aurora?
You know what we'll do? We'll put a link to Aurora's Patreon page in the in here and on our page, so you'll be able to find it that way.
All right, beautiful. We'll see if Aurora comes back home.
Yeah,
That was the best exit ever, though. Oh, she's
Hey,
back.
oh, no. You just go to patreon.com and look for my full name, Aurora Levins Morales. And I post a lot of my new writing and what's in process. And yeah, so it's an extension of Turtle Space.
Yay.
I just said while you were gone, Aurora, we'll post a link in the description here so people can find the link.
Great.
Fantastic.
Yay.
Good. All right. Thank you all. Aurora, thank you so much for your time. I know it's precious, and that you chose to spend it with us and chose to spend it, doing this is, again, it's such an honor. Again, this amazing, amazing elder, just phenomenal human being. I don't even have the words to describe how I feel right now. Everything that you've said thus far and how you've said it, it makes me want to, just, be a better human being, one, and two, really refine the way I articulate things. I really like the way that you speak and how you say things. Again, that is your work, and I'm just reminded of that every time I listen to you. And I could listen to you all day, so I'm so grateful.
But I can't talk all day.
I know. we can loop you, though, on technology. So.
Loop, a continuous loop.
Right? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my dears.
Thank you for this again and for the wonderful questions. And all right. See you all next week. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.